I remember standing at the altar, surrounded by roses and string lights, everything I had dreamed of since I was a girl. But when I looked out into the crowd, there were 2 empty seats, reserved for Mom and Dad. They never came. My husband squeezed my hand, whispering, "Maybe they're late." But the ceremony ended. The sun set. The candles burned out. And still, nothing. Later that night I got a text from my mother. "We couldn't make it. Your choices are too embarrassing for this family." I stared at the message until it blurred through my tears. "They didn't approve of Mark because he was a mechanic," said I, married beneath my name. But what they didn't know was that the man they dismissed had built something incredible. By the time we signed the marriage certificate, Mark and I had already launched our own automotive design company. Quietly, patiently. And when our first model hit the market, everything changed. But I didn't tell them. Not yet. I wanted them to think I was still beneath them. Because sometimes, silence is the sharpest blade. Then 3 years later, Mom called. Her voice sugar-sweet but shaky. "Melissa, darling, can you come by tomorrow? We need to talk." Family meeting. I smiled. Because by then I had something they'd never expect. Something worth more than every word they once threw at me. When I pulled into their driveway the next morning, I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was the woman they'd spent a lifetime underestimating. And behind me, gleaming in the sunlight, was the reason Mom had suddenly remembered she had a daughter. When I walked into my parents' house that morning, the air was thick with tension, like walking into a courtroom where everyone had already decided your fate. Mom sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, pearls tight around her neck like a noose. Dad was scrolling through his phone, pretending not to see me. And then there was my brother, Nathan, in his usual crisp suit, sipping orange juice like he owned the place. "Melissa," Mom said finally. "Were you concerned about?" I asked, setting my keys and the Porsche fob right on the table. "That post," Nathan chimed in. "You don't think showing off a luxury car after ignoring us for years is childish?" I almost laughed. Years? They ignored my wedding. They skipped my vows because Nathan's firm had a charity gala that same weekend. A gala my parents didn't even have tickets to, but pretended they did. Dad leaned forward. "You could have told us you were doing so well. We thought you were struggling after that divorce." I said softly. "But I learned something about being alone." Mom's lips curved. "And now you think a Porsche replaces family? Break time equals 2 /. That's when I smiled. The kind of calm, polite smile that hides a storm. "Actually," I said, reaching into my bag, "I brought something better than that." I placed a white envelope on the table. Nathan eyed it first, smirking. "What's this? Another success story?" I leaned back. "You could say that." Mom slid the envelope open. Her face drained of color. Dad's hand froze midair. Nathan's jaw actually dropped. Inside was a deed to the house they were sitting in. Because what they didn't know was that after years of ignoring me, I had quietly bought the very roof they were so proud of. Mom looked up, eyes trembling. "Melissa, what have you done?" I looked right at her and said, "Something you taught me long ago. Never depend on anyone who doesn't show up when it matters. Break time equals 2 /. But the real surprise wasn't the house. That came next. The silence after my words was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Mom's fingers trembled as she held the deed. Dad leaned back, eyes narrowing, trying to process what just happened. "Nathan?" He laughed, that smug, bitter laugh that always made me want to disappear when we were kids. "So what?" he said. "You bought a house with your startup money? You think that makes you powerful?" I tilted my head. "No, Nathan. I think it makes me free." He rolled his eyes. "You always had this drama thing going on. But let's be real, you probably used some guy's money for this." Mom didn't even flinch at his words. He never did. That's when I realized this wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush dressed as concern. Break time equals 2 /. I reached into my bag again. "Since we're all sharing updates," I said, "I have something else." I placed a sleek black folder on the table. Nathan smirked. "What is it this time?" "A will." "Not yet," I said. "But close." I opened it slowly, revealing documents with the company letterhead Harrison and Bloom Investments. Nathan's face froze. That's, that's my firm, he stammered. I smiled. Correction. That was your firm. Mom frowned. Melissa, what are you talking about? I looked at my brother. I've been quietly buying controlling shares for the past year. As of last week, you now work for me. Break time equals 2/. The room fell silent. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. You did all this for revenge? I looked him dead in the eye. No. I did it for peace. Then I leaned forward. You all thought I was fragile. You called me emotional, unstable, dramatic. But while you were busy ignoring me, I was busy building something that doesn't need your approval. Mom blinked rapidly, her tone softening. Melissa, sweetheart, we didn't mean to. I raised a hand. Please don't. You meant every word. I stood picking up my keys. Oh, and Mom. I said, glancing back. The rent is due on the 1st. Try not to be late. Break time equals 2/. I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. But as the door shut behind me, my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. Read. You think it's over, but you have no idea what your brother's planning next. That message, you have no idea what your brother's planning next, replayed in my head the entire drive home. The city lights blurred through the windshield, reflecting off the hood of my Porsche like tiny warnings. For a moment I thought about ignoring it. But the part of me that had survived years of family cruelty knew better. Break time equals 2/. When I got home, the quiet felt strange. I made tea, sat by the window and watched the rain streak down the glass. That's when I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street, engine running, headlights off. It had been there the night before too. I dialed a number. Carla, it's me, I said. Carla was my only real friend. My accountant and confidant since the early startup days. He picked up instantly. Melissa? You okay? I think Nathan's up to something. Someone just texted me. She sighed. You know him, arrogant but not dangerous. I hesitated. Carla, you haven't seen his eyes lately. He's not the same. Break time equals 2/. That night I couldn't sleep. By morning an email arrived from my bank. Unauthorized access attempt, 2:43 a.m. I froze. Nathan. He'd always been good with numbers, better at manipulating systems than people. But what he didn't know was, every account was double encrypted under a different legal entity. He thought he was stealing from me. He was actually triggering a corporate alert tied directly to my legal team. By noon I received another message, this time from my lawyer, Dana. Melissa, we've traced the breach. It originated from your parents' Wi-Fi. My stomach dropped. So it wasn't just Nathan. It was all of them. Break time equals 2/. I drove to their house that evening, rain pouring hard enough to blur the world outside. When Mom opened the door, she acted surprised, too surprised. Sweetheart, we were just talking about calling you. Don't, I said quietly. Not another word. Nathan appeared behind her, fake smile in place. Back so soon, he said. I held up a printout of the bank notice. Try again, I whispered. Next time, maybe use your own Wi-Fi. His smile cracked. You can't prove anything. I stepped closer, eyes level with his. Maybe not yet. But I will. And when I do, I won't need your apology. Just your signature. Break time equals 2/. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. Melissa, this family built everything you have. I paused at the door. No, Dad, I said softly. This family taught me everything I had to survive. Break time equals 2/. When I got home, there was another text waiting. This time a photo. Nathan. Standing in front of my office. Caption read. Round 2. The picture of Nathan standing outside my office felt like a declaration of war. He wasn't just angry, he was envious, desperate, and reckless enough to make it personal. I stared at that image for a long time before locking my phone and whispering to myself, all right, Nathan. Let's play your version of family. Break time equals 2/. When I arrived at my office the next morning, the building was quiet, too quiet. The receptionist looked nervous. Miss Parker, your brother was here again, she said softly. He said he needed to check something in the finance department. We didn't let him in. Good, I replied, forcing a calm smile. Next time, don't even buzz him in. But my heart was pounding. If he'd gone that far, it meant he wasn't alone. And if mom and dad were involved, they were funding it, emotionally or worse financially. Break time equals 2s/. By noon I got another call, from Dana, my lawyer. He filed a family claim, Melissa. Says your success came from joint assets your father invested in. I laughed, short, bitter, disbelieving. My father didn't invest a dime. He told me once I'd be lucky to find a man to finance my hobbies. Dana hesitated. Still, it's a formal motion. They're trying to freeze your accounts. That's when my calm broke. For years I had swallowed every insult, every snub, every smirk they threw my way. But this was their mistake. Because they just entered my arena. The legal, documented, airtight one. Break time equals 2s/. That evening I met with Carla at a small rooftop cafe. She placed a folder on the table. Everything's ready. Inside was a set of files. Corporate ownership transfers, blind trusts, asset reallocations. Once you sign, she said, they'll never touch a penny. It'll all move offshore under your foundation's name. I signed. Without hesitation. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up my old family photos and stared at them for a long moment. My graduation, my birthdays, the same fake smiles frozen in time. I whispered, this time I won't cry. Break time equals 2s/. That night a news alert popped up on my screen. Local businesswoman's family faces investigation over false asset claims. It had begun. I leaned back, sipped my tea and thought about the last time my family ever looked me in the eyes with pride. It had been decades. And maybe, just maybe, they were about to see what I really built without them. Break time equals 2s/. At 11:30 p.m. my phone buzzed again. A new text. From Mom. Melissa, what did you do? The bank called. Nathan's accounts are frozen. I typed back slowly. Round two's over, Mom. Now it's checkmate. But before I hit send, another message came in. This time from an unknown number. You think you've won? You should check your garage. The message hit me like a punch. Check your garage. My first thought was he wouldn't dare. My second thought was, of course he would. Break time equals 2s/. I slipped into my robe, grabbed my phone and headed down the elevator of my condo. It was 2:13 a.m. The city was quiet. That eerie, cold kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. When the elevator doors opened, the scent hit me first. Gasoline. I froze. Then I saw it. My silver Porsche, the one that had somehow become the symbol of everything my family resented. The windows were smashed, the tires slashed, and in red spray paint across the hood were the words. Disowned. For a long time I didn't move. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just stared. Break time equals 2s/. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message. A reminder that no matter how high I climbed, they still thought they could drag me down to their level. A guard finally came running. Miss Parker. Are you all right? We've called the police. I held up my hand. No. Don't. Because in that moment I realized something. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to see me flinch, panic, crumble. But they would never get that satisfaction again. Break time equals 2s/. I walked around the car taking pictures. Every detail, every angle, every letter. Then I opened my notes app and started typing. Phase 2, emotional exposure. If they wanted to humiliate me, I'd show the world exactly who they were. And I had years of receipts, messages, recordings, emails, proof of every cruel thing they ever said or did. When I went back upstairs, I sent just one text, to Carla, my PR contact. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. drop everything. We're going public. Break time equals 2s/. At 9 sharp I walked into her office wearing the same calm smile that drove my father crazy. The one that said I've already won. Carla looked up. Are you sure you want to go this far? I'm past sure, I replied. They taught me this game. I just learned to play better. We worked all day. Drafting a statement, curating screenshots, timing every release. By midnight, everything was scheduled. News outlets, social feeds, and a single press release titled, The Price of Being the Family Disgrace. Break time equals 2s/. When I finally lay down that night, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. But just as I began to drift off, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a notification. From Dad's company. Account suspended, executive access revoked. I sat up straight. They weren't done fighting. And if they wanted a war, they were about to get one. The message came early that morning. Family meeting. Noon. Dad's estate. Mandatory. No greeting. No apology. Just that. A command as if I still belonged to them. I showered, dressed in black, and drove there, not in my Porsche but in a rented sedan. They'd taken my car, my company shares, and tried to take my dignity. But they forgot one thing. My silence was never weakness. It was strategy. Break time equals 2 /. When I arrived, the front gate was already open. The mansion looked the same as it always had, the perfect lie wrapped in marble and money. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Dad sat at the head of the table, his silver watch glinting in the light. Mom was beside him, pretending to sip tea she hadn't touched. Daniel, my brother, leaned back in his chair with that smug grin that used to make me flinch. No one said hello. Break time equals 2 /. Finally, Dad spoke. Melissa, you've embarrassed this family. I met his eyes. How? You know how. He tossed his phone across the table. Headlines flashed on the screen. Billionaire family's hidden abuse exposed. Ex-daughter reveals emotional manipulation behind Parker fortune. Mom's voice trembled. You didn't have to do this publicly. You've ruined us. I leaned forward. No. I showed the truth. You ruined yourselves. Break time equals 2 /. Daniel scoffed. What do you even want? Money. I smiled softly. No. I already have what I want. Freedom. Then I placed a brown folder on the table. Inside, documents. Corporate transactions. Unrecorded accounts. The kind of evidence that could end Parker Industries overnight. Dad's jaw clenched. Where did you get this? You raised a daughter who listened when she was supposed to stay quiet. Break time equals 2 /. For a long time no one spoke. Then Mom whispered, Melissa, please. We can fix this. Just delete everything. I looked at her, the same woman who years ago told me I was too dramatic when Dad threw a glass at the wall near my face. I'm not deleting anything, I said calmly. You raised me to never back down from a lie. I finally learned to apply that lesson to you. Break time equals 2 /. I stood to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me cold. If you walk out that door, you're finished. I turned back slowly. Then consider me reborn. And as I stepped outside, I heard the chaos break loose behind me. Shouting, panic, the sound of my father slamming his fist on the table. But I didn't look back. Because I knew that by the time they stopped yelling, the news networks would already be running the rest of the story. The one that ended everything they built. Break time equals 2 /. That night my phone lit up with one final message. From an unknown number. You think you've won? You don't know what we still control. I stared at it for a long time, then started typing my response. But before I could hit send, my screen flashed white and the phone powered off completely. Battery? Well, it had been remotely wiped. For a few seconds I just stared at the dead screen. Then I smiled. They still thought they could control me. They didn't realize, control was the one thing I'd already taken back. Break time equals 2 /. I walked to the balcony, feeling the night breeze on my skin. Los Angeles stretched beneath me, quiet, glittering, unaware of the storm that was about to break. I took a deep breath and whispered, let it begin. Inside my apartment, a single laptop glowed on the counter. The one device they couldn't reach. It was connected to the encrypted server where I'd stored everything. The hidden documents, the voice recordings, the boardroom videos. And with one tap, I sent them all. To journalists. To regulators. To investors. And to one person I knew would make sure the story never died. My father's former partner, the man he once destroyed to build his empire. Break time equals 2 /. Within minutes, phones across the city started buzzing. Breaking news banners lit up the screens. Parker Industries under federal investigation. CEO's private accounts exposed. Insider leak confirms systemic fraud. I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the headlines roll in. Not with joy but with peace. Because it wasn't revenge I wanted anymore. It was truth. Break time equals 2 /. My mom tried calling. Then Daniel. Then even my father, his name flashing across the screen like a ghost refusing to fade. I didn't answer. I just let it ring over and over until the phone fell silent. That night I opened a blank notebook, something I hadn't done in years, and started writing. Not about pain. Not about anger. But about freedom. Because for the first time in 43 years, my story didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. Break time equals 2/. The next morning the world woke up to chaos. Stocks crashed. News vans lined their driveway. Reporters shouted questions that my parents couldn't dodge anymore. And as I sat in my car, this time my Porsche, parked across the street, I watched them step out in front of the cameras, their perfect masks finally cracking. Dad's voice trembled. Mom clutched his arm. Daniel looked lost. For a brief second I felt nothing. Then a strange calm washed over me. Because justice, when it finally comes, doesn't roar. It whispers. Break time equals 2/. Before driving off, I sent one last message to the family group chat. Just 7 words. I kept every promise you ever broke. Then I blocked the chat permanently. As I merged onto the freeway, the sunlight hit the windshield, and for the first time in decades, it felt warm. Not blinding, not harsh. Just warm. And in that silence I realized something beautiful. They didn't destroy me. They built the version of me that finally walked away. Break time equals 2/. Clapperboard, have you ever faced betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. True power is quiet freedom.